Hello everybody, welcome back to the video. Today we have the new OEMs released. We're going to be testing every single one of them, giving them ratings, giving me thoughts and my notes on them, and comparing them. Let's get right into it and start with the Fantic 250. And like I said, we'll start with the Fantic, where I wasn't a huge fan of it. I had a personal vendetta against it, if you will. I liked it a lot last time the OEMs, or last update, whatever you want to call it, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. It still had that lack of power, and it still does, has that lack of power, but now the front end feels a little bit more insecure. It's a lot lighter, and just overall doesn't feel great. I'm sure a setup can help solve some of that, but I wouldn't be 100% on it. I gave the ratings pretty harsh, you know, like 6 out of 10 on Supercross, 5 out of 10 on Motocross for the overall rating of 5.5 out of 10. Wasn't too happy with the Fantic, and bad way to kick things off. And yes, these aren't completely stock setups. What I'm doing, I'm lowering the gas and just putting the right tires on, but other than that, everything is stock and untouched. Then the gas was a very pleasant surprise. It came out, it felt very different. It's really hard to explain, but it was some sort of balance issue that really didn't feel like the other bikes, like in the preview even. So the KX was a lot different from the gas. It'd take a lot of getting used to and a half decent setup to make this 100% mainable, but I could definitely see this being a very viable bike for some sort of play styles and people. And one thing that is pretty good and a good way to start, you know, messing with the bike is the back end power and how much horsepower it really feels like the bike has, because you could really transform that with a bike setup in the right way and really make this your own and have a lot of fun with the gas. As the ratings would show, I like the Supercross more than the Motocross on this bike, and I like the ideal ability to sculpt the bike better for Supercross than I do Motocross. But 7.5 out of 10 for Supercross and 6.5 out of 10 for the Motocross side of things, for the overall rating of 7 out of 10. But like I said, with half a decent setup and a lot of time on the bike, and you can really put it together, I think that this is a 100% mainable, viable bike, and I would highly recommend trying to transform it, because you could come out with a really good result and a really good bike. And then the Honda felt perfect with the default suspension. It felt just at home. It picked up where we left off last update, and we basically saw some pretty good stuff, and it felt a lot of the same. But some things that were really interesting was how stiff and likely the front end was to tuck on Supercross. It was definitely noticeable how stiff the bike was on Supercross especially. And like I said, there was really no adjusting period. It felt great and right away, and it was just really nice and good to go straight out of the box. I don't know, I think I might have gone a little harsh with the ratings here, but on Supercross just wasn't that great in my opinion. So 7 out of 10 there, and then 8.5 out of 10 for Motocross. But the overall rating with the 7.75 out of 10 was really nice, and I enjoyed the bike, like I said, straight out of the box. And with the Husqvarna, there's quite a bit to say. First thing to really mention is how when the front end kind of pulls up a little bit, the weight kind of carries the bike side to side, or whichever direction you're leaning, which isn't always like the worst thing ever. It's also got some very deceiving power and some great traction going along with it, giving it a great balance, and just an overall, I think it is just a balanced bike, and that's really sick and awesome that the OEM team did a good job of putting variety into these bikes, and the Husqvarna really shows a great balance between everything. It's got a nice smooth drivetrain and not too much throttle controls exactly needed for this, and it's great for more calm, tamed, a little bit slower tracks, if you will. The ratings for this looked a lot better than I thought I was going to go in with, but the ratings coming out of the Husqvarna were great. Supercross is a 9 out of 10. I loved how, like I said, the deceiving power works with the traction and how you can come out of corners and just hit triples and everything like that. Motocross was a little bit annoying, because every little bit of roughness, you get that uncommon or rare front end pickup, and the weight kind of carried it off. So Motocross is only a 7 out of 10, and overall rating for an 8 out of 10. Husqvarna came away pretty good, and has actually surprised me quite a bit. And the Kawasaki was great. My notes from this came out stellar. Easy to recover from virtually any mistake. You could do anything and you can come back from it, believe it or not, on this KX. It's really nice, and it might be the little extra time I have on it from it being one of the preview bikes available to us beforehand. So that, obviously plays a plus. But perfect power to traction ratio. I love the way that the power can hit and the traction wouldn't just lose. Feels really flimsy and smooth, and you kind of go anywhere with it, and it's nice because you can be unprecise. You can decide at the last second, move line to line. It doesn't really doesn't make or break your lap or anything like that, in the way that you can kind of just manipulate the game physics to help with this bike is good. But the lack of stability through some of the rhythms on Supercross is quite annoying. It would, you know, maybe a little overjump and something like that. It would kind of mess you up a little bit. But on the motocross side of things, it was great. Hop right into the ratings here. 8.5 out of 10 on Supercross. So all things said, it wasn't horrible. And motocross was a 9 out of 10 for the overall rating of an 8.75 out of 10. It was a great bike, and I highly recommend. And this KTM wasn't really my type of bike, but I was really surprised what I came out with. It felt really smooth, and it was the most forgiving bike by far, and it was super easy to just flow. It was honestly one of the better bikes for that sort of thing. If you are one of those flowy, not so like power driven, fast, aggressive type of riders in the game. Obviously, it might sound a little funky and cringy, you know, obviously, but everyone has a riding style in the game and whatnot, and if this bike plays to your strengths, I highly recommend playing to your strength and picking this bike. It's great, super powerful, but very smooth on the power. But like I said, it's really not my style, so I was really surprised how I came away with it. Supercross rating, I gave it a 7 out of 10. Motocross, 8 out of 10. Overall rating, 7.5 out of 10. All things said, that's not my style. I'm sure some of you guys might like it, and, well, 100% will like it more than me. It's a great bike, and I think you can develop it quite nice, especially with a nice bike setup for both Supercross and Motocross. It's 100% a viable bike. And the old nanner, we're back on the 2015 technology. The Suzuki felt very stable but planted, and also very heavy, which is all good and bad things. And obviously the timing and weight was a lot different last update, and it still is. It feels a lot different from the average bike from the pack and whatnot, but the timing and weight definitely feels a little off. Weight carries like a mother trucker. I was talking about it with the Husqvarna. Same thing here for the Suzuki. This thing will carry once that front end's up, and there's no predictability going into that. I'll tell you that. It's so easy to scrub and move around in the air with this bike. Surprisingly, for how heavy and planted it felt on the ground, it's very nimble, and you can scrub really easily and just toss it. So it's really interesting the way that this bike kind of works. I'm curious how the OEM team was able to tune this, and it just felt a lot different. And time to adjust. This could easily be a top 3 bike for sure in this whole entire pack. It's such a good bike, and I love the way that it rides and feels. That being said, the ratings on it are surprisingly good. 8.5 out of 10 for me on Supercross. It was nice, and the bike really responds to Supercross in the way that works. Motocross was an 8 out of 10 for an overall of 8.25 out of 10 rating. It was a really solid bike, and like I said, enough time on it, a good enough bike setup or comfortability or whatever. It suits you, and it could easily be a top 3 bike in this whole pack. And this work of art, yeah, I'm joking. This thing was not my favorite by far. Had a very promising start. It was really good. When I took it out, first 5 seconds on it felt great. I like the power on it, but it gets thrown out of whack so often and super easily, and it's just not too great. When that sort of thing happens, it kind of pisses you off a little bit. Front wheel had literally no consistency. If back and forth you could do the same thing 2 times in a row, it would never be the same result. Not the best that you want. You don't want that unpredictability to be there always, and it was really light, and obviously you can fix that with bike setup, stiffer suspension, maybe a little bit more gas in the bike or whatever. It's got great power, but it's almost like the power's too much for the rest of the bike. Like, the bike doesn't really work well with that much power. So I don't really know what they were thinking about it, but yeah, the TM definitely not my favorite. Ratings look like 6 out of 10 for Supercross, 5 out of 10 for Motocross, for the overall rating of a 5.5 out of 10. Not great. And me oh my, I loved this Yamaha. I loved it. It was so good straight out of the box. I mean, I didn't even have to do anything, drivetrain or anything, but it was the most power in any of these bikes easily. This thing flies like no other. Very smooth though, so that's a great combo. Obviously you want that smooth with that much power. It's obviously really unique, nice, and good to have. The front end's a little questionable at times, especially at some of those higher speeds headed into some of the steeper corners or bigger berms, and that's not, like, obviously that's pretty realistic in a way that you can't just charge in Rambo and you go crazy. So that's really good that they kept it on the realistic side of things as well. Tough to really lose traction despite the high power. Like I mentioned, it's kind of got that smooth but more power, and most power in any of these bikes easily. I wouldn't be surprised if this thing's faster than the 350s out there as well. Definitely got the highest ceiling out of all these bikes for frickin' sure. It's that good. All that D-riding for great ratings. 9 out of 10 for Supercross. Motocross, like I said, that front end stability being a little questionable kind of lowered this rating quite a bit. So 7.5 out of 10 for the overall rating. 8.25 out of 10. Great bike, and that will be that.